Hey Maximus, today is going to be Plutarchs Morals and the notes that I took on this book. Natural ability without training is blind. Training without natural ability is defective. And practice without both natural ability and training is imperfect. For just as in farming, the first requisite is good soil, next a good farmer, next good seed, so also here. The soil corresponds to natural ability, the training to the farmer, the seed to precepts and instruction. Be mindful that good natural parts are impaired by sloth, inferior ability is mended by training, while simple things escape the eyes of the careless, difficult things are reached by painstaking. Water continually dropping wears away rocks. By toil, what is contrary to nature becomes stronger than even nature itself. Are these the only things that teach the power of diligence? Not so. 10,000 things teach the same truth. A soil naturally good becomes by neglect barren, and the better its original condition, the worse its ultimate state is uncared for. On the other hand, a soil exceedingly rough and sterile by being farmed well produces excellent crops. What horses broken in young are not docile to their riders, while if they are not broken in till late, they become hard-mouthed and unmanageable. The Greek name for moral virtue is only habit, and if anyone defines moral virtues as habitual virtues, he will not be besides the mark. Mothers ought to nurse and suckle their own children, for they will bring them up with more sympathy and care. Nature itself teaches that mothers ought themselves to suckle and rear those they have given birth to. For that purpose she has supplied every female parent with milk. From the beginning, the habits of your children must be carefully attended to, for infancy is supple and easily molded, and what children learn seeks deeply into their souls, while they are young and tender, whereas everything hard is softened only with great difficulty. The schoolmasters we select for our boys should be of pure character and great experience, for a good training is the source and root of gentlemanly behavior. Just as farmers prop up their trees, so good schoolmasters prop up the young by good advice and suggestions, that they may become upright. Anyone bearing the sacred name of father must know to obtain the best education for his son. Men, what can you be thinking of, who move heaven and earth to make money, while you bestow next to no attention on the sons you are going to leave that money to? Socrates. Many persons are so cheap about their children and indifferent to their interests that for the sake of a paltry saving, they prefer worthless teachers for their children, practicing a vile economy at the expense of their children's ignorance. I will tell you what happens to such admirable fathers when they have educated and brought up their sons so badly. When the sons grow to man's estate, they disregard a sober and well-ordered life and rush headlong into disorderly and low vices. Then at last the parents are sorry they have neglected their education, bemoaning bitterly when it is too late for their sons' debasement. For some of them keep flatterers and parasites in their retinue, an accused set of wretches, the defilers and pests of youth. Others keep mistresses and common prostitutes, wanton and costly. Others waste their money in eating. Others come to grief through dice and reveling. Some even go in for bolder profligacy, being whoremongers and defilers of the marriage bed, who would madly pursue their darling vice if it cost them their lives. Had they associated with some philosopher, they would not have lowered themselves by such practices, but would have remembered the precept of Diogenes, whose advice sounds rather low, but is really of excellent moral intent. Go into a brothel, that you may see the little difference between vice and virtue. Good education and sound upbringing is of the first, middle, and last importance. I declare it to be most instrumental and conducive to virtue and happiness. for all other human blessings compared to this are petty and insignificant. Education is of all our advantages the only one immortal and divine, and two of the most powerful agencies in man's nature are mind and reason. Mind governs reason, and reason obeys mind, and mind is irremovable by fortune, cannot be taken away by informers, cannot be destroyed by disease, cannot have inroads made into it by old age. For the mind alone flourishes in age, and while time takes away everything else, it adds wisdom to old age. As I advise parents to think nothing more important than the education of their children, and that our sons must be kept as far as possible from vulgar twaddle, for what pleases the vulgar displeases the wise. Unskilled am I in the oratory that pleases the mob, but amongst the few that are my equals I am reckoned rather wise. For those who are little thought of by the wise seem to hit the taste of the vulgar. That is by Euripides. Philosophy ought to be regarded as the most important branch of study, for philosophy is the only cure for the maladies and disorders of the soul. Excessive sleep and fatigue are enemies to learning. That's Plato. What has not been said is easy to say, while what has been once said can never be recalled. No one ever yet repented of his silence, while multitudes have repented of their speaking. Our boys must be taught to speak the truth as a most sacred duty, for to lie is servile, and most hateful in all men, hardly to be pardoned even in poor slaves. The faults of young men are often grave and serious, as gluttony, gambling, drinking, deflowering of maidens, seducing of married women. Such outbreaks ought to be carefully checked and curbed, for that prime of life is prodigal in pleasure, and needs a bridle, so that those parents who do not strongly check that period are foolishly giving their youth license for vice. Sensible parents ought during that period to guard and watch and restrain their youth through advice, examples, and threat when needed. We ought, at all hazards, to keep our boys from association with bad men, for they will catch some of their villainy. Do not give everyone your right hand, that is, do not be too eager to make friends. Do not put your food in the chamber pot, that is, do not throw your pearls before swine, for words are the food of the mind, and the villainy of men twist them to corrupt meaning. Before all things, a father must, by a good behavior, set a good example to their sons, that, looking at their lives as a mirror, they may turn away from bad deeds and words. For those fathers who censure their sons' faults while they themselves commit the same are really their own accusers, if they know it not, under their son's name. Those who live a depraved life have no right to censure their slaves, far less their sons. Besides this, they will become counselors and teachers of their souls in wrongdoing. For where old men are shameless, youths will of a certainty have no modesty. We must therefore take all pains to teach our sons self-control. Consider how much the animals follow nature. The male animal does not go with the female at all times, for its aim is not pleasure but procreation. The female, being submissive and tender, attracts the male by her beautiful conditions of body, and when pregnant modestly retires and takes thoughts for the birth and safety of her offspring. Every animal exhibits for the young affection and forethought and endurance and unselfishness. For universally the love of animals for their offspring makes timid ones bold, lazy ones energetic, and greedy ones unselfish. Any sensible man would be disgusted and flee from a woman who took the initiative in love. Through weakness and effeminacy, you will become a woman's prey. Never fall victim to either. Every kind of life with virtue is painless and pleasurable, whereas vice, if infused into it, makes splendor and wealth and magnificence painful and sickening and unwelcomed to the possessors. He is deemed happy in the marketplace, but when he gets him home, thrice miserable, his wife rules all, quarrels and domineers. There would be no great difficulty in getting rid of a bad wife if one was a man and not a slave. Pile up gold, heap up silver, build covered walks, fill your house with slaves and the town with debtors, unless you lay to rest the passions of the soul and put a curb on your insatiable desires and rid yourself of fear and anxiety. You are but pouring out wine for a man in a fever and giving honey to a man who is bilious and laying out a sumptuous banquet for people who are suffering from dysentery and can neither retain their food nor get any benefit from it, but are made even worse by it. Have you never observed how sick persons turn against and spit out and refuse the daintiest and most costly viands, though people offer them and almost force them down their throats? But on another occasion, when their condition is different, their respiration good, their natural warmth restored, they get up and enjoy and make a good meal of simple bread and cheese. Such also is the effect of reason on the mind. You will be content if you have learned what is good and honorable. By the aid of philosophy you will never live unpleasantly, for you will learn to extract pleasure from all places and things. Wealth will make you happy because it will enable you to benefit many. Poverty, as you will not then have many anxieties. Glory, for it will make you honored. Obscurity, for you will then be safe from envy. The mind is in its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. He who is dissatisfied with himself for falling in love calls in reason to his aid to overcome his passion, for both reason and passion are in his soul, and he perceives they are contrary one to the other, and violently represses the inflammatory one of the two. Moderate anger is useful to courage, hatred of evil to uprightness. The brave man's color never changes, nor is he much frightened. That's Homer. That quote's by Homer. In regard to pleasure, we must do away with excessive desire. True friendship has three main requirements: virtue as a thing good, familiarity as a thing pleasant. For we ought to choose a friend with judgment, rejoice in his company, and make use of him in need. Attach yourself only to those worthy of friendship and likely to be serviceable to you. Most people in friendship regard only what can be got out of it, overlooking what will be asked in return, and not remembering what will be asked, and not remembering that he who has had many of his own requests granted must oblige others in turn by granting their requests. Truth is a divine thing, and according to Plato, the beginning of all good things, both to the gods and men. How do you avenge yourself to your enemy? Become a good and honest man. If you say your enemy is uneducated, increase your own love of learning and industry. If you call him a coward, stir up the more your own spirit and manliness. And if you say he is wanton and licentious, erase from your own soul any secret trace of the love of pleasure. For nothing is more disgraceful or more unpleasant than slander that records on the person who sets it in motion, than slander that recoils on the person who sets it in motion. For as the reflection of light seems most to injure weak eyes, so does censure when it recoils on the censorer and is borne out by the facts. Those who wish to lead a good life ought to have genuine friends or red-hot enemies, for the former deterred you from what was wrong by reproof, the latter by abuse. He who was a discerning spectator of life and character and words and deeds will perceive that most of what he envies comes to those who have them from diligence and prudence and good actions, and exerting himself in the same direction, he will increase his love of what is honorable and noble, and will eradicate his vanity and sloth. I cannot feel one that cannot retain, pumping up wise words for an unwise man. That quote's by Euripides. While other people retain what they hear, overly talkative people lose it altogether. Being empty-headed, they resemble empty vessels and go about making much noise. Every man of modesty and propriety would avoid drunkenness, for drunkenness is madness. What is on the heart of the sober is on the tongue of the drunken. If all other passions and disorders, of all the other passions and disorders, some are dangerous, some are hateful, some ridiculous, but in talkativeness all these elements are combined. No spoken word has done as much good as many unspoken ones. This is the reason men teach us to speak, but the gods teach us to be silent, silence being enjoined on us in the mysteries and in all religious rites. For no spoken word has done as much good as many unspoken ones. At some future day we can give utterance, if we like, to what has not been said, but a word once spoken cannot be recalled, but flies about and runs all around the world. Command your eyes not to weep, your tongue not to speak, and your heart not to tremble or quake. Those who have enjoyed a truly noble and royal education learn first to be silent and then to speak. The curious man is more used to his enemies than to himself, for he finds fault with and exposes their shortcomings, and shows them what they ought to avoid and correct, while he neglects most of his affairs at home, owing to his excitement about things abroad. Man must first be curious about himself, so that he can recognize his own faults and get rid of them. As Socrates advised people to abstain from food that made them eat when they were not hungry, and from drinks that made them drink when they were not thirsty, so ought we also to shun and flee from those objects of interest, whether to eye or ear, that master us and attract us when we stand in no need of them. All passions and maladies of the soul are accompanied by the very things which we think we avoid through them. Thus infamy comes through too great love of fame, and pain comes from love of pleasure, and plenty of work to the idle, and to the contentious defeats and losses of lawsuits. Praise from others is the most pleasant thing a man can hear, but to others a man's self-praise is most nauseous. Yet in spite of all this, there are occasions when men may venture to speak in his own praise, not to cry up his own glory and merit, but when the time and matter demand that he should speak the truth about himself, as he would about another, especially when it is mentioned that another has done good and excellent things, there is no need for him to suppress the fact that he has done as well. The man struggling with adversity, who stands up straight against his fate, in fighting posture like some boxer, and instead of being humble and abject, becomes through his boasting lofty and dignified, seems to be not offensive and impudent, but great and invincible. Not less, but still more, lawful is it for man who is wronged to speak on his own behalf to those who treat him with ingratitude. Frank outspokenness, when it is part of one's defense, admits of boasting. They then that are wronged generally mention what they have done well to those who are ungrateful. As man you must oppose the praise not of men, but of bad actions, for such praise is corrupting, and causes people to imitate and emulate what is base as if it were noble. Man can enjoy no greater blessings from God than to attain to virtue by the earnest imitation of the noblest qualities of the divine. We ought to restrict and confine ourselves to what is useful, and dock or sell, to build a temple of liberty for ourselves, our wives, and our children. I'm going to read that. We ought to restrict and confine ourselves to what is useful, and dock or sell useless superfluities, to build a temple of liberty for ourselves, our wives, and our children. The toilsome and never-ending roots of debts grow and spread all around, ruining and choking the safe haven of your home. Have you anything? Do not borrow, for you are not in a necessitous condition. Have you nothing? Do not borrow, for you will never be able to pay it back. If you were content with things necessary for subsistence, the race of money lenders would be as extinct as centaurs. It is luxury that has created them as much as goldsmiths, perfumes, and dyers in bright colors. Brightly shines brass in use, but when unused, it grows dull in time and mars the house. This is also appropriate to the character of man, which gets rusty and senile by not mixing in affairs, but living in obscurity. Life itself and the way we come into the world is so ordained by God that we should know one another. Reason makes man master of everything.